Okay, I apologize, everybody. I was live for a second there, and then my computer just disconnected me. It's saying it needs another update on there. I hope it lets me continue push through this. So let's see if I can continue. Thank you for that. So again, why do we edit photos? It's pretty simple. It's for the extra 20% of the photo that we want to pop. These photos probably didn't need to be edited, but you can clearly see by making these changes that we have on the screen that they pop a little bit more. They show off the parts that they probably wanted to show off. The baby's skin looks extra smooth. The little girl doesn't get lost in the purple of the sweater. The sky and the grass look brighter in the top section. And the portrait of the girl goes from A to C, and you can see where the skin lightens up, the highlights pop a little bit more, the blue or teal of her sweater pop, all things that might be beneficial when you're editing. And for those of you joining me, thank you again. My system crashed. I hope it doesn't crash again, but we should be good. Editing softwares. If you're editing with a RAW, these are four of the softwares I might recommend. Photoshop, Lightroom have been around for a while. Capture One Pro is great. Corel Paint Shop Pro is great. There's another one that I've used before called Affinity with an A, Affinity. Great as well too. You pay for them, but they're not subscription based like Photoshop and Lightroom are. However, the Photoshop and Lightroom services are great because they can constantly edit and add new updates to it that you can just take advantage of with that subscription that you're paying. So again, for those joining, this is my step-by-step on how I edit photos and what I look for when I'm doing that. So first things first, crop and clean your image. Start by straightening out the alignment of the photo. After that, go through and make sure that you don't have any excess negative or dead space in the image. While you're doing this, spot cleaning should also occur at this time too. And for those of you watching at home, if you have questions while I talk, feel free to chat in. I'll answer those live for you. If there's no questions, I'll just continue to go slide by slide. The second step I do after my crop and clean is to go through and adjust the white balance. So white balance doesn't refer to exposure. Rather, it refers to the color of your overall composition when it comes to the white color specifically. White, though, will dictate most colors, so keep that in mind. You will have less to play with when you're shooting in standard JPEG versus RAW, and this is where that color bit I talked about a moment ago is important. When you're using a RAW file, it has a higher color bit versus JPEG, meaning things that involve color will have much greater effect when you're editing a RAW versus that JPEG. Some editors will have presets you can control and change, others will have temperature and tint, and some will have a combination of both. So now, again, white balance affects the whites of the color. White naturally affects almost all colors on a canvas, in a photo. Now that we've played with that, let's get into what we call the exposure and the contrast. Those are the darker aspects. That's the light and the shadow of the photo, if you will. So exposure, for example, will play on the brightness and darkness of a photo. Be aware of making a photo too bright because you're going to get a muted or muddled look to your photo. Contrast, on the other hand, plays with dark and light tones. High contrast makes the image stark and very dark and very light sections. Low contrast will make things look flat or washed out. The goal is always to aim for the middle. Again, when we're looking at these images, we can kind of see the difference between the before and the afters, how certain aspects of them are lightening up, how other parts stay dark. The goal of exposure and the contrast is to always find the middle ground. You either want things to look doomy and gloomy or light and lighthearted. Again, it depends on the image and what it is you're after. But going to the extremes of either one, whether it's exposure going extreme to one direction versus the other, or contrast one or the other, will start to muddle out your photos and either leave them looking very light or very dark. Again, the goal is always to aim for the middle. When playing with exposure and contrast, though, there's a tool that you can use that a lot of people enjoy. It's called a histogram. So again, exposure and contrast have to do with the darkness and the lightness, where light comes in and casts shadows. In that case, we can measure that, or the image is measured that, with what's called a histogram. Now, a histogram measures highlights, midtones, and shadows. And typically, on your camera, if you hit the display or the live view button, you should be able to toggle whether or not you can see this while you're shooting, or when you look at an image on the computer, you should be able to pull up its histogram and look at how it's measured. Highlights should be one of the lower categories. Again, highlights exist to help make the midtones pop, especially when they have a little bit of shadow to help contrast that. Midtones should be the highest. Why? Because there should be more midtones than any of your shadows and highlights. And shadows should come in at the second most, because shadows will bring out more depth in the midtones than giving highlights the ability to kind of finish it off and give it that fine tuning so that you have a pop. Now, you might not ever need to use one of these, but it's a useful way for you to understand how light is being measured throughout your image. On the left-hand side, you kind of see that, the overexposed, the properly exposed, the underexposed. But now, if you look at the right-hand side, you can see 4 images that show off some really amazing color, contrast, and just interesting subject matter in nature. However, their histograms make 0 sense. How can this be if a histogram measures balanced light? Shouldn't a balanced histogram be for all these photos? And that's where a histogram is not necessarily always needed, but it's a fun tool. If you are someone who's curious on how light is being measured throughout your image, a histogram will give you that visibility. But is a histogram going to make or break a good photo? Not at all. And again, it comes down to how you're taking the photo, how you're executing it, and then what other steps you're going through to make it pop and to look good. But a histogram is not always needed. Now, we've talked about the darks and the light aspects of this. Let's talk about the color. The color comes into our photo through vibrancy and saturation. So similar to contrast and exposure, again, these are controlling aspects of our photo, right? Exposure is controlling color, shadow and lightness throughout the entire image. Contrast is looking at the tones, the lightest and the darkest areas, and boosting or deboosting, or increasing or decreasing them. Vibrancy and saturation are doing the same thing, but with different names. So vibrancy would be like your exposure, and contrast is like your saturation. So vibrancy, flip-flop, my apologies. Vibrancy will increase or decrease the color intensity in the brightest colors throughout your image, much like contrast focus on the darkest and the lightest. Saturation will increase or decrease thoroughly throughout the image. And again, the pictures that I have showing here show that off. Vibrancy being on the right, saturation being on the bottom. Both can be used and both can come hand in hand when you're editing your photos. And then on top of that, it's important that you still remember that contrast and exposure exist. Just because we change one thing doesn't mean we can't go back and change or edit another. And it's important to think about that when coming into my final step, the sharpness of an image. I don't like to edit sharpness until the very end of my editing experience, when I've gone through and changed everything that I need to, and now I'm left with an image that just needs a boost in sharpness. It's one of the last things to do after you edit the other parts of your image. Sharpness is going to bring out definition and depth of field within the image. If you do it too much, though, it's most likely going to give a halo effect around. And on my side, when looking at it, the fox shows a halo, but I think the frog is the best example of a clean, sharp image. The frog itself is clear on the right-hand side. You can see the shine from its skin. Whereas the fox has a little more detail, but it does look like it's washed out or haloed. Now guys, getting into it again, we talk a little bit about what do we do after we've taken the image. I'm a huge proponent of showing off your work. I think all too often we end up putting this stuff on a computer or a cell phone, or we post it one time to social media and we do nothing with it after the fact. I think frames are fantastic because we can show off the pride and the joy of our labor, of our camera learning, of our trips, of whatever it is. If you're not someone who wants to frame an image, digital frames exist, and they're great things to add to your home. They don't take up a lot of electricity, and they show off all your prideful moments. Now, videography is an important aspect to look at. Videography and filming is a very, very popular thing nowadays. A lot of people, businesses, and entrepreneurs are trying to find ways to create hype or to create notoriety around their business or whatever it is they're doing. For a lot of people and a lot of various different things, the still image isn't as powerful as it used to be, especially with cell phones and with other little gizmos that are doing a good job taking photos. We are still in the business of taking photos. Most people I see who buy a camera are interested in that, but there are a good few who are more interested in taking video and turning that into their business or their passion or their way of supporting their own, vision. If you're getting into it, there's 3 main steps you should know when going through the process of filming videos or content: pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production is the initial steps to begin making your project. Production is the main phase of capturing clips and films to use. And then post-production is where you put this all together to make the final piece. Pre-production is all about figuring out what equipment you're going to use, who or what you're filming, where you're filming, what time of day you're filming, and also to make sure that you've done your research to be safe, secure, and to get it done in one go. Production, though, is the main phase of capturing these clips and films to use. It's your ability to finally put all that stuff together that you put in pre-production and get out and get the hard work done. Post-production is where you put it all together. You make the final piece. You've done all the work you needed to do, and now you can confidently sit there and put it all together and show off the final product that you're trying to get at. Other important aspects to remember are video ratios, resolution, and FPS. Your resolution dictates, or I would say is dictated by what you're using this video for. If you're posting it to social media, or just you're sending it in text message form, SD or HD is probably the best way to go. If you're using this for YouTube or some higher platform services, or again, a commercial of some sort, 4K is probably the way to go, if not 8K if you have a camera that's capable. But just also keep in mind that most cameras don't, or most TVs don't have access to 8K video yet. Sorry. Some TVs have access to 8K video. Most do not, and most streaming and everything else that you're watching is either in HD and in 4K. Ratios. That just changes the size of your sensor, what parts of your sensor are recording. It's more for an aesthetic effect. It's not necessarily done for any real purpose. Reality of it, if you choose 1 by 1, that's a good way for you to do your square video for your Instagram or your Facebook. But for the most part, I'd say 4:3 or 3:2 are the standard. 16:9 can be a little bit more dramatic if you want to bring in that ratio more and have those black bars showing. And then frames per second. How many frames are happening per second as you're recording video? Important to keep that in mind when shooting things like slow motion. The more frames that you have for something like slow motion, the better chances you are of then playing that back and getting every little detail. If you're shooting something standard, like what the news would show, or maybe what one of the Modern Family might show. 12 to 24 frames a second are more than enough. At Cheetos are good. Hello there. Now, I talk about the must-haves. You can figure this out any way that works for you, but I always like to say that camera quality, lighting, and audio quality are your three most important things. You gotta have a camera that shoots appropriately for the content you're trying to make. Doesn't have to be movie quality, but it's gotta work for you and your brand. Lighting, again, choosing a lighting method that works well for you in the environment or the situation that you're in. And audio quality, using something like a shotgun mic, an on-camera mic, or a wireless mic in order to make sure that you're hitting the proper quality that you need. Starting with lighting, there's all sorts of different kinds of lighting, whether that be on-camera flashes, LED lights or light blocks, or the infamous ring light. If you are past this point and you need more, the next option I might recommend would be a professional studio lighting. This is the most ideal lighting when shooting indoors. The key light is your main light that hits at the subject. The backlight takes away that background to foreground separation and flattens things out, or creates more depth of field depending on what you want. And the fill light takes away any of that excess shadow that might have been created with a key and a backlight. Here's some examples of microphones. Again, lots of different options to go with, lots of things to consider. Your camera does have a microphone in there, but it's usually a weak microphone, and you got to remember that it lives inside the housing of your camera. Therefore, it's not going to be the best quality, nor is it going to pick up the most information that you probably need. From there, then, you can get an on-camera mic. You can also buy wireless mics, boom mics, even lavalier mics, depending on what you're looking for or need. Now, one of the final things to talk about is stabilizing your shot. And there's a few different ways that you can go about this. A lot of people will look into tripods. Tripods are a great starting point, especially if you're not doing video that requires movement or anything that requires you to run and gun. Monopods are great, still photo tripod or ball head joints are great. But for video specifically, you probably want to get more of a video-centric tripod that offers you the pan, tilt, and rotational methods. When it comes to stabilizing your shot, things like single-handed gimbals, two-handed gimbals, or the body gimbal or stabilizer vest might also be a great option for you. Again, I would base these on your needs and your use case scenarios. Not every person in the world needs a body gimbal. I mean, not everybody even needs a single-handed gimbal. Personally, I don't use gimbals for when I'm shooting video. I don't need them. I'm not running and gunning. But for the times I have used one, whether that's a friend's or a colleague's, they're very simple to use. They're not that complicated, and they are fun for the most part. Again, just depends on you and how you're going about your shooting. But a single-handed gimbal, tripods, those are all great stabilization methods, and if you need to get fancier, there are options that exist based on your use case scenario. And that's all I got for you guys. So I kept the class under an hour. Next Thursday is Beyond the Traditional Cameras. It's the last Thursday of the month. So for those of you watching right now who might be interested in joining, that is going to be on January 29th. That'll be the last camera class of the month. February, we will then start back up with the same schedule. We'll start with the intro, then the intermediate, then the advanced, and then the traditional class. But January 29th is the Beyond the Traditional Camera class. I'll sit here and wait for a couple minutes. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, now is the time to chat in or type away if you have something. If you don't, by all means, take my information, shoot me a call, give me an email, or just call Apt Electronics, ask for the small electronics department, and myself or any of my colleagues can help answer those questions for you. doesn't look like anybody online has any other question for me, so I won't keep everybody here waiting. Guys, thanks for joining every Thursday. Again, next Thursday, the 29th, is the final class for the month. Then we will go back to the intro class at the beginning of February. So January 29th, if you can, join us for Beyond the Traditional Camera. That's where we're going to talk about things like drones, GoPros, action cameras, other camera-related items that you can get that are beside your DSLR mirrorless or point-and-shoot and bridge cameras. So, my name is Saxon. I'm here every Thursday from 5:30 to 7. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. And if not, feel free to reach out to the store or come in anytime. Guys, have a great